welcome. I'm Empty, and I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of the A-10 Tank Killer 2 for DCS. I've had some comments on previous videos of mine where I'm just doing operations and I wasn't explaining anything, so I'm going to do an explanation video and kind of a walkthrough. So, what we're going to start with is we're just going to walk through what everything is. Easiest way to do this is we're going to start from back to left. So, or back right to then going all the way to the left. So this is an old alignment system, or the HARS, which is not actually there in the A-10 anymore. To the right of that, or outboard of that, we have our interior light setup. So this is what you'll use at night in order to light up the panels with either floodlights or lighting behind each of the things. Right in front of that, you have your exterior lighting panel. To inside of that, you have your TACAN panel, and right above that, you have your ILS panel here. You kind of have a miscellaneous panel for your environmentals overall, which is ironic that it's environmentals, because yes, this does deal with pressurization, but this is kind of not. You have your canopy defog, which is environment, but then you have your windshield heat, and then you also have your your windshield heat and defog, and you got your bleed air dump switch as well, and then you have your windshield wipers, which is that. But you have your pitot heat, which isn't really environmentals at all. Then you have your oxygen here, which we already have on, and I'm breathing, as you can tell by the flow valve. This is your CDU and your CDU control switches here. So this is CDU on, IGGE, and this is how you can cycle through other points. Primarily for this page, you're going to stay on other, which then allows you to manipulate everything in the CDU. But for steer points, we will, I'll show you cycling between mission, mark, and flight plan modes. You have your electrical panel, which includes your emergency floodlights. So this, even with the battery off, will give you some emergency flood. So there's actually a whole separate battery that controls the ladder extension and then also the canopy. It's a very, very small battery and exterior to the aircraft, but their floodlight as well, the emergency floodlight. Okay. Coming next to this, you have your warning panel, which it's just called EW, but it's your countermeasure panel. So it'll include the jammer, the missile warning systems, your RWR, and your dispenser mechanisms. Up from that, to the right, you have your canopy open, close, and hold. You've got your fuel right here, along with your hydraulics right up in here. Then you have your engine stack information, which is all over here. So this is going to be your engine 1, engine 2, so left engine, right engine, and then you'll also have left engine, right engine here. So you have your inner RPMs, and then you have your fan RPMs, which this is primarily giving you your thrust here, and then you have your fuel flow. This is going to be your temperature and then your oil pressures. These two down here, this is the temp and the RPMs for your APU to make sure your APU is running correctly. Of course, you have your two MFDs here and here. Center here, you've got an extension of this countermeasure panel up here up front, along with your RWR display there. You got your attitude indicator, your VSI, or your climb indicator. You got your altimeter, your HSI, your navigation panel, select panel here, and you got your airspeed indicator. You got your standby attitude indicator right here, and then you have your master control switch panel, which includes your master arm, your gun packs, your laser arm, your targeting pod on, changing your HUD to night mode and other parts, and then powering up your MFDs and your HUD as well. Then you have your gear and flaps panel, which is right here. You have your fuel management panel, which is right down here. We won't go too much into that one. Sweet. This here is some bit test and old systems along with your HARS system. It's mainly not used. You also have your NVG lights, so night vision lights, and that'll be for your exterior lights for that. Sweet. And you have your lamp test and bit test. This is your SAS system, so that's going to be your a system that helps your flight controls. So you have your yaw and pitch here, and this button here will be, and you have your yaw trim here. All the other trim is going to be set by your stick, which I hid, which is this right here is going to be your trim. But your yaw is going to be over here. In order to reset your trim quickly, you can go ahead and just hit this for takeoff trim, as you can see there. Okay, then you have your IFF panel. Primarily for this one, and I'm going to just move these up. It's not going to do anything since no power is on. You're going to flip this to, when you're using it, to master norm. Sweet. So pulling that back. Actually, I'm going to keep it forward and kind of look over here. We're going to close this. So you have your engine fuel flow switches here, and then you have your engine operation switches here from ignition to norm to motor. Primarily, you just want to make sure that the engine fuel switches are set to norm, not override, and then the engine operation switches are in norm, and that'll allow a normal start. Sweet. This is your flaps switch, if you were wondering. So you got up, mid-range, and then down. Sweet. Aft the throttle, you have your autopilot system, which is your EAC. So once we get the IGI aligned and we have the navigation panel set on IGI, then we can turn our EACS on as long as we have our SAS on as well. And then we'll go through the autopilot later. We've got our ARC 210 radio here. We got our mid uniform radio. So this ARC 210 is all three types of radios. It's a uniform VHF FM and VHF AM radio. This middle radio here is just a uniform radio, and this aft radio is just VHF FM radio. And aft of it, you actually have a way of encrypting the middle radio, as most A-10 call it, is the mids radio, which would be your CAD 1, and then CAD 2, which is going to be your aft radio or your FM. And the on switch is going to be right here. You can change the crypto keys by cycling through this, but we're not going to mess with that today, and that's only going to be used if you're in a hardcore DCS sim. Then you have your emergency control or control surfaces panel. So this will be allow you to go into manual reversion. It's pretty hard to fly in, and then this is also how you're going to set be able to do emergency trim as well for your nose up, nose down, besides the yaw here. But you will have to flip it to emergency override in order to set that. And yep, primarily unless you get hit, you won't have to deal with this panel at all. Behind that, you have your intercom system, or enables you to turn off radios. So if I want to silence a radio real quick, I can click that. Or it allows me to change the volume of radios. Primarily, this is going to be useful for you if you're doing a multiplayer mission type stuff. Sweet. You have your stall volumes and other volumes here as well. And you have your IFF extension on top or bottom, selecting which one. And you have your have quick TOD for your ARC 210. You also have your G-suit valve, and then if you want to be silly and funny and you want to use the A-10's gun on the ground, you have your arm ground safety switch that you can override and turn off and use the gun on the ground. Sweet. So that gets us done talking about all the panels down here in the cockpit. Then we have our upfront controller right here. And this allows you to quickly interface without going down here to the CDU. You have all this functionality right here, which we can, or I will talk about in parts of this, or if people want to comment and ask for more of that, I can provide more information on using that upfront controller for the UFC. Sweet, so let's go ahead and get our checklist, because all good pilots end up having a checklist out, even though we'll go by flows, but this is how we will make sure we have everything set. So we're going to turn on the battery first. I know it says turn on the UHF radio, but technically you don't want to do that because you can actually damage the radio by kicking power to it with it on, that type thing. So we're going to go ahead and turn on the battery power and turn on the inverters. And we're just going to kick this to both. That will then allow us to set that. So, and this is my bad, I should have talked about this before. Some key binds that you'll want to have set. As you see on my knee board, we have the pinky switch aft. So let's go through the HOTAS controls that you want to bind. So basically, you're going to come to the A-10 control page, and you're just going to scroll down until you see HOTAS. You pretty much want all these selected. So, starting at the top, you're going to want to bind, which I think I don't have that bound right now because I don't really need an emergency disconnect switch. But you're going to want your trigger first and second stage of your trigger bound. Then you're going to want your boat switch bound. That's going to be on your throttles for the actual A-10. And so I have it set to where it's aft center and then forward center. Then you want your China hat switch set. And a lot of those controls, those two controls, are going to be dealing with your targeting pod and weapon systems. Then you have your CMDS switches. So that's going to be your countermeasure switches. So you're going to have a press in, a forward, aft, left, and right. Coolie hat. So that's going to be able, what you're going to use in order to make things soy, which we'll talk about later. So sensor of interest. So you want up, down, left, right for all of those. DMS switches, that's going to be how you can manipulate stuff quickly on different pages of your MFD. You're going to want forward, aft, left, and right as well for that. And then you have your left throttle button, which... sorry. Obviously, I don't use that very much. Oh, sorry. So the left throttle button. I've got bound twice here. The reason why is the left throttle button, which is going to be disengaging and engaging your autopilot. Sorry. That one does not work for me, so I actually use, I don't know why it just stopped working pretty early off, but yeah. You got your master mode switch is going to be on your stick. And then you have your mic button as well. So the way this works is SRS actually uses the mic button for that's built in here in DCS. So that's kind of nice. Nose wheel steering button. You'll also need that one. The pinky switch, as I mentioned, that's going to be controlling your lighting panel. So you're going to want to put that to off in order to have your lights be shown. Middle will then hide it, and then forward does a different set for it, which I'll show you that once we get up and running a little bit more. Then you have your speed brake button as well. And then primarily for weapon use, you need your TMS forward, aft, left, and right. And then for flying for sure, you want your trim. Forward, left, right. Nose up, nose down, left, and right. And then last but not least is your weapon release button, which is going to be for everything but the gun. Sweet. So now that we talked about that, we might be able to just take a real quick messed up peek here. Nope, the lights aren't on. Let me go ahead and put this onto flashing because we're going to be starting an engine soon. And we can then, nope, it's not wanting to go. Maybe now? Nope, okay. I guess the APU's got to be up and running. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get the APU up and running. So the APU switch, as I mentioned here, we're going to put this back up because that's supposed to be there, is right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just flip the switch that I have on my throttle quadrant in order to turn it on. So now we got the APU started. We're going to wait for it to come up and temp. It's going to drop back down, and the RPMs are then going to settle. It should take about 30 seconds in order to be set. So we're going to run through these radios. So we've got our UHF set. Pinky switch is to aft. We just reset the accelerometer, and I set the exterior lights are good. Let's double check to see. And we're going to go APU. Yep, flaps lever is as indicated position. And then we want APU is on start, and now we're going to do APU generator is on. So now we just saw some things go active because now they're given power. And now we're going to turn on the CDU and IGE to start the alignment. And we can double check, and yeah, we got flashing lights for exterior lights now. So now that we got that set, we can go ahead and start our engine. So I'm going to do it based on what the checklist says. So we're going to go ahead and just move up the left throttle into the idle position. And there's the left throttle. And now I look to see that we have the engine start cycle going. Engine start cycle is going, and we have RPMs. We have light off. The oil pressure is now coming up. And we're going to slowly get fan RPMs coming up as well, and we're going to get more fuel flow. We'll know that it's done with the start sequence as soon as the start cycle annunciator goes out. And as you can tell, all of the left side hydraulics, oil pressure, and generator have now, annunciators came offline, which shows that those are now being powered. And now the engine start cycle has finished, and yeah, the fuel flow ended up coming up. So then now we can go ahead and start the second one. We got a drop in APU. We have RPMs. Oil pressure is coming up. We got fuel flow light off. And our fan speed's coming up as well. So while this is running and finishing up that start sequence, we can go ahead and start turning on our radios. So it says FM AM on. We're going to go ahead and turn that to TR, and we're going to TR ground comm the forward radios, so that gets those set. We're going to go IFF to on normal, so to normal for our IFF. We want to make sure the emergency brake handle is fully in. Okay, and then now this has us go to the CMPS, the countermeasure system panel. And I might have said it weird earlier, and we're going to go ahead and turn that on into standby mode. And then it says to turn on our TACAN. TACAN is set, and I'm going to go ahead at that point turn this on. As we're waiting for this, or we're waiting for our alignment to go, to see the CDU. For this long alignment, we're looking for it to be a 4.0 to 0.8. If you're looking for to do the fast alignment, what you're going to do is you're going to hit, it says LSK nav and then for it, but that just takes you back to that alignment page because this is an older checklist. So what you got to do is systems, INS, alternate align, and then click fast, and that'll speed it up pretty quick. And I can keep it on this page to see the rest of it. Awesome. So while we're waiting for that, this says we need to set our takeoff trim. So now that we're over here on this page, or this panel, we're going to set our takeoff trim, 2 seconds, 1 potato, 2 potato, and then we're going to turn on our SAS. Sweet, with our SAS on, and that's set. Let's go ahead and continue with the rest of this checklist. So it says we need to turn this to switch to test. On the up front controller, the UFC, we're going to clear that so that we don't have to see it. We're going to hit enter on there, and the initial bit test should take 50 seconds. While that's going, we're going to turn on this and turn on this. That's going to start powering up our CMDS and the rest of our combat systems. So since those are now on, we can now turn on our MFDs. And once we do not have a targeting pod, so we don't want to turn on our targeting pod right now. And then our standby attitude indicator, we want to uncage. And see how, and then it says do our SAS to engage. I'm not really going to worry about that because we already did it. And they engage. FYI, in order to get these to engage, you need the APU power running and the APU generator on. Now, while we're waiting for that bit test for the IFFCC to finish, we just see that we have our nav system is aligned. So we're just going to click that to nav. Now if we come back to that checklist, it then says on our navigation management system panel to then select EGI, and then to either Steerpoint, Anchor, or TACAN. We can talk about this later, but I primarily stick, if you have a TACAN that you're wanting to use, you can put that in there. Or if you're sticking to Steerpoints, you can then just put Steerpoint. Okay. Now back to the other part of the checklist that we were on. We want to get our altimeter setting. Nope, actually our test is complete because it says exit up here. So what we can then do is hit enter on this, and then we can just turn on the IFFCC. And boom, we got that set. So now I'm noticing that we have a negative 470 feet. So we're going to go ahead and cycle this in order to bring back up the altimeter setting. And I believe the actual like altitude here is like, this is just insane. Let me double check something real quick because I find this altimeter setting crazy. Yeah, oh my gosh, it is 3045. Talk about a high pressure. Awesome. Okay, sweet. Now that we got that set, altimeter is set, we can then turn off our APU. So we want to go APU gen off first, and then we can turn off the APU. And now the APU's there, and we never had the ladder open. If you ever want to extend the boarding ladder, it's just this here, but it defaults to having that closed. And then earlier I already turned on the helmet mounting queuing system, and we want to engage nose wheel steering with the nose wheel steering button, and that indicates right here. So as you can tell, we have our indicator for our cockpit unlocked, and technically I have the canopy open full. So now we want to do our before takeoff checklist. The before takeoff checklist, I like to do, you can do it while you're taxiing, but you can also do it here before you even taxi. So I'm going to set the flaps to the medium setting, which should be right below the 10, or right above the 10, I mean. Okay, we got our speed brakes are closed. I'm going to go ahead and hit that switch. The IFF, we're going to not worry about right now because I already set it to norm. You could have set it to standby. Actually, technically, should be in standby. So it's standby for now. Oxygen is set. Defog is set. We will finish up this checklist once we get there. Get going there. So last but not least, I missed this step here. We do want to arm our EACS, our autopilot. So we're going to flip that switch. And now our annunciator panel should just say anti-skid and our seat arm. And then we also have that one indicator for our canopy unlock. So you can either do this before or after. We can load up weapons. So let's go ahead and rearm. We're going to go with a default training loadout. Like this.
Request rearming. Copy.
And we're going to have them rearm us. So one thing that we need to do in order to set up the rest of the computer system the way it needs to be for the plane is we need to load the DTS card or upload it. So, but we want to make sure we wait until we have our payload on board on our pylons before we do that, because otherwise I'll mess it up. So now it actually tells us that it's that there's something on there because there's a mismatch on the
Rearming complete
from what was originally there. So we can acknowledge that. He said rearming is complete, so we can just hit load and wait for this to load. Sweet. As we're waiting for that to load, we can talk, and I'll get airborne and we can talk about some of the CDU stuff once we get in there. But what I'm going to do initially is I'm going to use flight plan mode for our CDU. And I'm going to sit on this flight plan page because we'll talk about that. Actually, we can talk about this real quick. So this flight plan page allows you, the first one's always going to be with the mission maker preset in there for you. But you can always make a new one. So we can go ahead and type in new. And FYI, I've got all the CDU functionality set to my keyboard. So then I can just type on my keyboard. And so set that there. So if we go look at the original one, it's got all these points in here that they have us going to. But I don't really care for that. I'm going to go with, I want AG1. I'm going to do Sanaki. We're at Koboleti. Let's double check this. Alright, I'm on Tactical DCS's training server. So, TACAN, I'm going to put KBL. So what we're going to do is on this one, I'm going to go, we're going to go into Flight Plan 2. We're going to go initial point, because I always want my initial point in here. And then let's go with Koboleti, and see how I just typed in the first few numbers and it automatically come up. So KBL, let's see if that is a waypoint. Nope, it's not a waypoint in here. I was seeing if the TACAN was. But we knew the TACAN was 67. So now we have our TACAN set for the runway here, or for the airfield. And I want to go with AG1. Sweet. Now let's say I want to fly to a point. Let's do north about 15 miles from Waypoint, or from AG1. So how would I set that in there? So if I want to fly north of AG1, so I clicked offset here. I don't like seeing all these lat longs because I'm an A-10 pilot. I've worked with the Army. I want to go MGRS. So I'm going to go to the UTM there, and now I've got MGRS set. But I wanted to work with AG1. So AG1, and then I'm going to throw this here. So now I have AG1 set here, and I want to go north 10 miles after I hit AG1. So 360, which is the north heading, for 10 miles. And then let's say I want to go, let's go 320 for 15. Oh, whoops, sorry. Hold on. So now that I got this in the offset page, I need to make that a waypoint. So we're going to go PT1, and I'm going to make it a point. And now I'm going to do that 320 for 15 here. And we're going to go PT2. And then let's go ahead and make a third one at, let's go 270 for 10. And we're going to do PT3. Sweet. So now I can go back into the flight plan, and I want to load those after AG. So we're going to do our own little flight plan here. So PT1 here, PT2 here, PT3, and let's also say that I want to set up for a final back in here. So if we look at the runway, we got 070 is the runway. And say I want to set myself up for a 5-mile final for 070. So remember, if I want to set myself up for a 070 and I take a line, so that means it needs to be at a magnetic of 243. So 243 for this runway. Since this is going to be the point for Coballetti, and I want to set up this for final, so what I can do is go into offset, Coballetti, throw this in here, and I'm going to go 243 for 5. See how I didn't put any slashes in there? Put that in there. And now I'm going to put final 07. And boom. And now I can go back to the flight plan and set this up as final 07 and then put Coballetti as the actual touchdown point. And then I can put my initial point so I taxi back to this hangar. Cool. So now I have the flight, I've got my own personal flight plan in. So what we can do is, you can see how this one says auto for the mission, the one that the mission maker made. We're gonna select 2. So now it says manual. So what that means is that it's a manual flight plan, which means with my HUD as soy, I have to DMS switch up or down in order to get it to cycle through my waypoints. But if I put it in auto by clicking this a second time, now as I fly over those waypoints, it will go to the next one. So that's how we set that up, and we'll mess with editing waypoints later, or we can actually just talk to it real quick. So say final, we're here. Let's go that first PT point that I wanted to go to. So what was that? The 15, let's see. So that's how I can see, oh, yep, I was right. So waypoint 15 in my flight plan is that PT1 that I made. And say it is 18, or correction, it's 0504. Say I wanted to get there at 0520. Okay, so what I want to do is 0520, and I can put a TOT of when I want to get there. And I can also put in some winds that I'm expecting there as well. If we go to the next page, we can get additional steer point information from that, and we can see that the TOT is in there. And time to get there is about 19 minutes according to this, but it's going to be messed up because, or time to go, so that's the amount of time I have until I have to get there. Sweet. Which isn't quite right. I don't think it's calculating very well because I'm on the ground. Sweet. So now that's showing you some of the waypoint pages. So what we can do is we can go ahead and start our taxi. First things first is because the A-10 is screwy, and the way it works is that you have to, or it always has the wheel chocks set. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell the ground crew to remove the wheel chocks.
Chief, remove the wheel chocks.
Sorry about that. I
Copy.
will be honest with you guys and just
Wheel chocks are now
be
removed.
me. I'm not going to do a whole bunch of editing. Sweet. So wheel chocks are removed. We're going to head and start taxiing. Go ahead. Let's get clear of this hangar first. And then I'm going to hit the brakes just in case we lose a brake. There we go. Brakes check. And we're cleared to runway 07. Okay, let's double check our instruments here. We got numbers decreasing, balls right, and we got 2 set numbers decreasing. So what I meant by decreasing is that I had a left good turn, so that means I'm going from like a 270 to 240, so numbers are decreasing. And I see that on my HSI and in my HUD. And then the ball is right here, and that swung out. So we can go through some of the pages that we have for the A-10. We can go ahead and power up the targeting pod now. So looking at the left MFD, we have our TAD page. That's going to be our tactical display page for the A-10. What we can do is, if we make it soy by TMS left long, you can see how we have the silhouette blue or green line around the outside, and we can zoom in and out. So you can tell that flight plan that we put in is in there now. We've got our initial points, and then we have AG1, which is our next point, which it's cycling to that because it's detecting that we're at Kobuleti. And then we can go ahead and make that soy again, and we can zoom on out, and we can see we have waypoint 15, 16, 17, and then 18. So that's the 3 PT points that I made, and then the 1 additional final point that I made. So there are ways that you can use Markpoints, and that we'll talk about. We can talk about here momentarily, and we can actually update points in the system, especially if you know the waypoint's number. But now that we're here at the hold short of runway 07, we're going to stop and finish our before takeoff checklist. So flaps are set, speed brakes are in. We are going to close the canopy. As the canopy is closing, I'm going to arm the seat. Sweet. And we are set for the before takeoff. So we're going to get clear for takeoff, and so we're clear for takeoff. We can now then start our lineup checklist. Lineup checklist, we're going to go anti-skid is on, pitot heat on, and that's the end of the lineup checklist.
1-1, unable to clear for takeoff.
So as you saw, I put the lights to steady, and anti-collision is on. Okay, and we can power. So if you're doing a static takeoff, you're going to set power to about 80% RPMs, right here, as you can tell. Make sure all the engines are good, and you're going to brace release, get rolling, power's up. Okay, you're going to keep the nose wheel steering on, unlike other aircraft. We're going to clear the checklist out of the way. You're going to make sure that nose wheel steering is on until 70 knots indicated, and we're above 70, so nose wheel steering is off. I'm going to wait, since I'm light, we can wait till about 120 knots, and I'm going to rotate and just let her climb up. And positive rate, gears coming up, and flaps are coming up. Real quick, we can start talking about some of the autopilot system. So the autopilot system, what I did is we've got the rad altimeter on, which is the button just to the right, is this button here. And then we've got the autopilot engaged or disengaged. And then here we have our different settings for our autopilot. So I'm going to get started turn towards AG1. And then we're going to set, it's currently set to path. And I'm going to turn on the autopilot and explain what path is. Path is where you're going to set the flight path marker on a particular angle up at wings level, and it'll actually continue that climb. So it's going to be like an attitude hold. So whatever attitude you had, it'll hold. Right now, it did the dipping wing because I'm off balance. I have different types of drag, so I needed to put some roll trim in order to get that level. So right now we're about a 6-degree climb. At 220 knots, we'll go up to about 4,000 feet, and we'll level off, and I'll do a different mode once we get to 4,000. So around 1,000 or two, or sorry, about 100 or 2 feet, I'll go ahead and kick off the autopilot. And kicking it off, and we're gonna level off here. That was a little late on me. Okay, and I already flipped the switch because I've got it on my HOTAS controller to out heading, out/heading. And what this is going to do is it's going to hold an altitude, and you can help your autopilot by doing a few clicks of trim to help it out. Out and heading mode is it's going to maintain the heading and the altitude that you set it on. So this is going to be ideal for when you're driving a long ways in order to set it. So as you can see, we have all of our waypoints out there for our little shenanigans that we're going to do right now. So we got that AG1, the air-to-ground range for tactical DCS is right out here, and you can kind of see some of the information out there. And we should see it sequenced to waypoint 1 momentarily. While we're waiting to get there, we can go ahead and, so we talked about the TAD page. We have our bullseye location for bullseye here. We also have a raw for the cursor for this. See this cursor? So if I bring it to an entity that's part of the system, it'll show me the bra to me. Sorry. So I would need to fly that reciprocal. Or if I flip it, now this is the from my own to the hooked, and so that's what I have to fly to get there. So we're at 0.3 from AG1 right now, and you can see that it now sequenced to our 0.1. But before we go to 0.1, we're gonna flip this switch, and I'm gonna show you this. So we're in out heading hold right now. So I'm gonna flip the switch to altitude hold. And what altitude hold's good for is you still can turn the aircraft. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to turn, and we're still on altitude heading right now. So I'm going to do a left bank turn and reset it, and boom, we're on altitude hold. So whatever bank angle we set it at, it'll maintain. And you can wiggle it all you want, it'll go back to whatever you set it at. So in order to remove it, you have to disengage the autopilot, either through that switch right there, or, so this little button, sorry, not switch, or by using the button, the left throttle button. Okay, so now that we're turning around in this location, I see that we've got a red smoke out there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change my targeting pod, which we're on the targeting pod right now, to air to ground mode. So right now it's just slave somewhere off the nose, and as you kind of saw there, you can see an outline there. But I want to take it and throw it on that red smoke. So right now I have soy in the HUD, but what I can still do is DMS right long, and wherever my crosshair is for my HMCS, I can DMS switch long, and it goes to wherever the crosshair is for my HMCS. See that? Sweet. And what I can do is now Coolie hat long right, and boom. Now I have my soy for the targeting pod. Now if we look at the targeting pod, we got some useful information around the outside and on it. To control some of the settings for the targeting pod, we can actually go into control, and you can adjust information in here such as laser code and latch information. Main thing that I like to switch is I like to go to feet, and I like to go to MGRS. So let's get this back onto that smoke here. If we do a boat switch aft, that will make us white hot, and then if we do boat shift forward, that'll make us black hot. And then if we do boat switch center, that's where we have our TV mode. So let's say I want to make these tanks a Markpoint. With the soy with the targeting pod, if I TMS switch right, I can make a Markpoint. Now, if you look on my CDU, I have a Markpoint set in here. And as I mentioned, I can make that a new waypoint. which let's just go ahead and make it a new waypoint. So we have 4 times MBTs, or they're actually like T55s, I think. So T55s, so we can do, let's do 4x T55s, and we can make that a new waypoint. So that's how we can do that. Now let's just say we're gonna make another waypoint empty, okay? And we're just gonna put it at that same location. But let's say, and I did it empty because that's my call sign. Let's say, and that was waypoint 20. And let's do a mark point with the HUD instead. So you see I still have my SPI as my steer point, next steer point. But let's say I want to make my, not with my HUD, with my HMX. So now I'm going to go TMS switch down, or sorry, Coolie hat down long, or down short. And now my HMX is soy, as you can see here. So at this point, I can TMS switch right, which TMS switch right with whatever soy, except for like Mavericks and stuff. Any actual sensors, so either your HUD, your targeting pod, or your helmet, will make a mark point by doing TMS switch right. So we're going to TMS switch right, and boom, I made mark point Bravo. Now let's say I want to make Markpoint Bravo. I want to throw that as that empty point. So the way to do that is I can then do, I remember that that was waypoint 20, so I can just do 20 and throw it there. And now that information for Markpoint Bravo is there, but I can't see it right now. So what do I need to be able to see it? I see Markpoint Bravo because what it does is even when you're in flight plan mode or mission mode, it shows the last mark point that you made. So in order to change this to be able to see it, I either need to throw that empty point or those tank points into either my flight plan, or I need to change to mission mode, or mission steer points. So I'm going to change to mission steer points, and now I've got the empty plus the mark point Bravo, because that was my last mark point. And then if I look over here, you can see that I now have an M4, so M4 times T55 point over here. So if we look on the TAD, I'm going to make this soy and zoom in. We now have that point there, which is waypoint 19, and then I've got that point over here, which was the empty waypoint. Sweet. So that's kind of covering some waypoints. In addition, let's say that I was given the grid by the JTAC, Kilo Mike, 5, 6, 7, 6, 9, 7, 2, 1, 6, 9. Okay, so I can actually update this without that Kilo Mike. Since this is still Kilo Mike, I can throw it in there, and boom. Now it moved, and it didn't move much because I didn't change it very much compared. But see how it moved on. But let's change it to a 6-digit. So let's say it was 558-720. Okay, so we're gonna throw that in there, and you can see that it automatically puts the zeros in there and moved it to that point there. So that's how you change that, and you have your elevation here if you want to change it. So say I wanted empty to be more of a fly to point, like I'm doing with those other ones. Actually, let's do this. So empty is a point of reference that I wanted on the ground, but those points, like final and those other ones, I want those to be points that I will actually fly to. So let's go to waypoint 15, because I remember that was PT. And let's say I want to be at 5,000 for this one. So 5,000. And let's go to PT2. And we're going to go to 5,000 for that one. And we're going to go PT3 to 5,000. And then last but not least, that final point, for final, I know that I want to do an overhead brake there at Coboletti. So, overhead brake, I should be at 1,500 feet AGL for the overhead brake for initial. So, what I'm going to do is go 1,500 for that elevation. So now, if I look out, that these PT points, they appear now that they're in the air. I don't know if PT2 took. Let's see. So that was 16. Oh, that would help if I actually put enough zeros. But there. So now you can see that, and let's double check this one to make sure I actually typed it well. Yep. So now I can actually just fly to those points and I'm good. So let's go ahead and just fly that direction. Now, if you noticed, I made, or it made, when I switched to the mission style points, it changed my center of interest, or my my steer point and my speed to initial point again. So it'll cycle and do that. But we're going to go back to flight plan mode. Or actually, before we go back to flight plan mode, I'm going to show you Markpoint. So Markpoint is the only way that you'll be able to see all your mark points out and about. So, for instance, I'm going to make my hammock soy and put down a whole bunch of mark points. So this is useful if you're going to target a whole bunch of things. I usually don't do this. I will sit into mission mode, or I'll throw target information into, because I like to be able to look and see my steer points with the information. So like with that Markpoint Alpha, I can't see the information anymore for it. I just see Markpoint Alpha. I don't know what it was. But if I change back to mission, I can see that Markpoint Alpha was 4 by T55s. So that's the reason why I like to use the steer points. And you can see that all those mark points went away when I switched to mission. Okay, so that's some basic information on being able to use the CDU and flying around at the same time and making different points. Now let's say at any point, if I wanted to, for those mark points, I can make those soy by just being into the mark point mode for the CDU, for the steer points, and then in the HUD, just cycling through, and you can see that right now I have delta as my speed, my sensor point of interest. Or my sensor point. Yeah, the speed. So you can cycle through it that way. Now, let's just say I wanted to make the targeting pod speed. So how you would do that is soy the targeting pod and then TMS up long. And you can see that the targeting pod is now soy. And is now speed. And if you look, I can move that off of that targeting area so you can see that it's not attached to Markpoint Alpha. You can do the same thing with the HUD. You can do the same thing with the hammocks. So say I want to make, I've got the helmet mounted queuing system, and I see something, and I'm just going to make it speed out there like that. So right now, if I want to, I can go boom. I can capture that, and then boom. And I can go boom, or I can go boom, boom. And you also have this extra cursor that you can move around in the HUD as well, using that your slew function for your targeting pod. And I didn't mention that earlier. That's one of the keybinds that's not technically in the HOTAS section that I showed you. So if you look at the HOTAS section here, and we go and look at, for me, it's an access bind, and so it's right here, but HOTAS Slew is right there. And so if we go back to, if you wanted to use like a keyboard and mouse or something for that, is these right here, these HOTAS Slew. So, but yeah, it's Sweet. And we're going down for real. Alright. And, oh, if you heard that, that big warning sound. So that big warning sound is when you're max performing the aircraft. So I pulled right around 5 Gs for that. And see, oh, and now I got into the louder noise. So that louder noise was, or the, not the louder noise, but the beep, 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 beep. That is you trying to overperform the aircraft and you're going to stall. So you're doing an aggravated stall. But if you do the single noise, you're max performing the turn for what airspeed you're at, like that. So you want to sit in the horn and then come out of the horn for max performing your aircraft. Okay, so I'm going to change this back into flight plan mode. And we're going to head to SP2. So what I'm going to do is TMS switch down long, which I put us back into flight plan mode. And so it took us back to that next waypoint that we had in our flight plan mode. And it made it, and then I TMS switched down long to take the SPI away from the HMX, since I put the TMS, or the soy back to the HUD. And then I TMS switched down long, which then takes it back to the steer point that's in the HUD. Sweet. So we can go back to 5,000, or we can go up to 5,000. Negative G's in the aircraft, which would make people sick. Sweet. So another thing that I can show you, without going into too much of the combat, or well, might be a little bit of the combat situation stuff, but since I have my HUD as soy, now I have another indicator that I can control. So this is your HUD cursor. And so you can actually use this and set that on the ground out there somewhere. So say you see smoke or something like that, and you can actually make that soy by TMS up or forward long. And then you can go aft again and boom, it moves it back. And if you TMS, I made a crap ton of Markpoints there. Sweet. And we can just bring that back up to the HUD. And sweet, we're gonna go to Steerpoint 2. Another thing that we can do is with the HUD as soy, and this is a little bit getting into more of a combat situation. So right now, you got the master mode switch that I talked about earlier with keybinds. You can hit the master mode switch and cycle between guns, CCIP, CCRP, and nav in the HUD. So we got nav up right now, which is fine. But say I want guns, okay? So guns will give me my gun Pipper. It won't right now, as you can see, because I don't have the gun arm. But let's go to training and gun pack arm. So now should be, yeah. So now it says CCIP invalid. So it was just needing a good calculated impact point for the gun. So what I can do is now, right now it says SPT in the bottom left-hand corner of the HUD as my soy, or technically as the speed. But if I TMS down one more time, now my CCIP Pipper is soy, and you can kind of see that with that. So what that means I can do is now that my CCIP Pipper is soy, I can China hat forward long, and that will actually slew my targeting pod to whatever SPI I have. So right now, since I'm up and airborne in the CCIP, it goes automatically back to the steer point. But if I roll over, and as we come here, and I point the gun down, now I have the or the IFFC as my SPI, and now you can see the targeting pod is now slewed to my gun Pipper. So that'll be good later on when I go through a little bit more of a tutorial on accurate distance gunning, which will be primarily for non-armored targets or infantry, that type of thing, where you want a bigger spread. If you're going after a tank, you're going to want a tighter spread, or you want it to be tighter, so you're hitting the armor all in one spot and damaging it. So that's some things that, without going into the combat stuff, that we can go through for now. We can talk about real quick. Let me get level again at 5,000. There we go. That's good enough. We can talk about some other of the navigation stuff. So as I mentioned, we've been in Steerpoint the whole time. Oops, my autopilot kicked off. Let's come back here and boom, there we go. And I'm still in alt hold. I want alt heading. There we go. Somehow my switches got messed up. Sweet. So we're in alt heading mode, and so it should level out and stay at that heading. Cool. And I'm going to start slowing down a bit because I don't want to get too far. And we'll come out of training and packs off. Sweet. And we'll go back to nav mode. So we've got our HSI here, which we can set up the courses all we want. And right now it's showing that I'm headed to this steer point ahead of me. But let's say I wanted to do TACAN information. So the way that I would set the TACAN information is hit TACAN here. And now that TACAN is set up for Coboletti, because that's what I set, the 67 X-ray. So if I wanted to fly right now, I'm currently at a 330 radial outbound from Coboletti. If I wanted to fly direct to Coboletti, I would turn 151 right now. But let's say I wanted to fly in for that initial. So I could set, and this is how it would work for an approach. You would set your course here, and then you would fly to intercept that course line. So as that course line comes in, so as you can tell, right here we are at for a 130, we're a full scale deflection off. And then as we get closer, we come closer and closer to a we're about a half scale deflection, or a 1 dot deflection now. And now it's creeping in. So I set a 143, let's do a 140, and you can see it creep in as we get closer to that 143, or basically a 320 radial off of that Coboletti TACAN. And then you have this information here, which is going to be your DME to that TACAN, which is going to be 12 right now. So you can see it creeping in, and then as we go past it further, and I'm going to start descending. And I'm going to set this on path and brought back the power. You can see now we're going away. So that 140 course, we are now no longer at the 140 course to the TACAN. We have moved past that, and the course is now going to the left. So that means we're right of the course right now. So it kind of like shows the aircraft where it's at from that course. But let's say I wanted to set up, I got my steer points. I can see that. I can see the steer points in my helmet mounted cueing system and in my HUD. So let's say I want to just set this up for this approach as well, in addition to flying the steer points. So I can go ahead and set this on that runway. But remember, it was 243. So I need to go this way. to a 243. Because that heading wasn't quite right. And we'll see how messed up DCS's like mag heading and stuff is here to see what it actually is. Because if I go to the F10 menu, and right now I'm zoomed in on the aircraft, so if I go to the F10 menu and do that line again, do this line, I can then see that it's actually, yep, a 063. I don't know how they have it as a 07, runway 07, but beats me. But we also got to remember that that won't be the actual radio that we need to be on. We should actually be on a probably a 057 in order to intercept the end of the runway correctly. So those are different things that we could do. In addition, we can also fly the ILS, which I can show you real quick while we set this up, or setting this up. So ideally, I don't know why this is shaking so much. Got some weird wobble. Interesting. Oh, that's why.
Warning,
For some odd
autopilot.
reason, the autopilot messed up. Okay. So, we got those set up for our approach and everything. But, let's say I do want to fly that ILS. And I know the ILS for the runway is 063. And we're going to go... We're going to set that final approach. So that was, what, 19? 18. So, waypoint 18, we got it at 1500, which is fine. So what we'll do is we'll fly an approach. I'll show you how to set up an approach. So if we look back at the F10 menu, we saw that the ILS frequency is 111.5. So in the TACAN, we want 111.5. Okay, so we got that in, and then I want to turn this on. So see how that little knob there? We're going to turn that to power on. So now that power's on, we're going to come back in here, and I need to descend back down. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly out a bit. And I'm going to go set up another point off of that final. So final 07. So final 07 into here. And I'm going to go another, let's go 3 miles further. So 243 for 3 more miles. And we're going to just say ILS 07. And the reason why I'm setting this, and I'm going to put this in the flight plan, and we're going to then place this ahead of final 07. So how we're going to do that is we're going to do ILS, so that pulls that up, and we're going to insert, and there. Sweet. So now that's in our flight plan. Okay. And as you can see, it's right there, but let's say that, so we want to go waypoint, waypoint, and now that is, and we're going to make tad soy real quick here, and that is waypoint 21. So then 21 here, and we're gonna say we want to be at 2,000 feet for this. Sweet. So that's set, and we're gonna turn back in, descend down to 2,000 feet. We got the ILS set in there. or we got ILS set up on the correct page, but the problem is we need to set up for the ILS. So the way this is going to work is to set up for the ILS is first, let's get down to 2,000 feet inbound to that ILS 07 marker that we made. And see, you can easily be able to manipulate the system in order to be able to set up these points for yourself off of there. So like say, for some odd reason the mission maker doesn't give you the base, you can go into what's called the divert page, which I can show you real quick as we're getting down here to altitude. So the divert page, so we're going to go CDU here. A quick upfront control method is you have all these function keys, which then allows you to use these bottom points, which correspond with these here. So we can go function, nav, and then we have this divert page. So now we have those divert waypoints that we have, but we also have Cobaleti. Cobaleti is our closest point, and so we can actually select that. So you can select that or see what waypoint it is, and then be able to set your flight plan and everything else up off of that. Sweet. So I'm actually going to go back to our waypoint page, and I can, or back to the offset page, and we're set there. Okay, so I need to get on altitude, and so I can get this set up real quick. Stand by. Okay, so we have the TACAN set, which that gives us that range. So what I want to do is I want to set up the ILS. So I already set up the ILS on the panel. Now I need to select ILS here. Now we don't have any ILS information displayed except the course right now. But if we want to do that, we can get additional ILS needles by hitting this. And then that gives us the course line up in our HSI as well. So as you can see, according to the ILS, we have our TACAN information here. We have our runway 063 for runway 07. And you can see we are right of course, and we're pretty far right of course. And then we actually have our glide slope indicator. If we didn't have a glide slope, it would be off, there would be a flag here. And now this is alive. So we've got glide slope coming down, as you can see here. And we've got our course coming alive, so that's why I started my turn. And what we can go ahead and do is, I'm pretty slow right now, so let's go ahead and get configured. So we're going to go gear down and flaps since we were intercepting glide slope. And we had some balloon here, so I'm going to correct because I'm still right of course. We are on glide slope, so it's going to be a 3-degree glide slope in. Still right of course. So you're going to use both sets of needles, the course and the ones in the attitude indicator, in order to make sure you're aligned. So there can be instances where you have a high enough crosswind where you're actually going to be to the side. So we've got 100% flaps, gears are down, indicators check. We are a little fast for our weight right now. We are on speed, on glide slope. Everything looks good here. So what we're going to look for is in the rad out, which is going to be up in our HUD, we're going to be looking for a 500 feet indicator. So that's our next waypoint that we had there for final, and it switches to Cobaleti. So we're going to look for a 500 foot indicator, which it actually should say pull up, pull up. Usually that's the indication, or not 500 feet. We need 200 feet for an ILS. So these ILSs will bring you well down underneath the clouds into a safe margin. I'm slightly below glide slope, but I'm on course right now, which is the black line there. So I'm just adding a little bit of power to get in. And we're going to do this to a touch and go here. And then we're going to come back around and I'll show you the overhead brake. So right now I know that I'm at 2 mile final, or 3 miles right now. And we're on glide slope, on course, We're just a little bit below glide slope, but we're looking good. And I'm trying not to cheat by looking above. So as you come in on the ILS, it's going to get more and more sensitive to your up, left, or up and down and left and right. So you want to make sure you stay stable at a consistent speed and get your trim all set and just fly it in.
Altitude.
Okay, yep. There's that 500 feet. So that's when I'm going to start glancing up at that rad out to make sure that at 200 feet I see the runway. And obviously I already see the runway. And we're slightly above glide slope, so trying to get back to it. There we go. And we are at minimums. Visual landing. And we're just going to keep her going, driving right down that line. And we're going to ease back as we cross the threshold on the throttle and just ease it. Now, before we put the flaps, or before we put the throttle up, we need to get flaps back to 50 for takeoff.
Speed brake. Speed brake.
And speed brake in. And of course, it'll yell at you if you have the speed brake in. And positive rate, gear up. And we're gonna fly, we're gonna go north for back out to that final for initial. And we're going to get to 1,500 feet, 250 knots. So the A-10 likes to fly down low at, if you can be at 250 knots, be at 250 knots. If not, whatever you can max based on your drag index, because you're going to have a big drag index. So I'm going to bring back our speed to final. And we're at 250. And, so if you look at the indicators now on our, oops, before I talk too much, I need to frickin' be set on altitude and airspeed and everything. I need to be at 1,500. Okay, but you can see the flags in our HSI and in the, both the flags in the attitude indicator, and we did have the flag in the HSI, but now it's gone away because now it's picking up the edge of the ILS again. Sweet. So we're just going to leave the ILS set in there. You don't actually need it, but it can help you a little bit on final for patterns and stuff like that if there's an ILS available. But for the for this pattern, what we're going to look to do is we're going to do an overhead brake. And I'm going to pull this up just to make sure we do all of our checklists. We didn't really check do our before landing checks, but it's pretty simple. You're going to make sure you get your altimeters checked, the defog, de-icing is set, anti-skid is on. You're going to make sure that you're in the right nav configuration down here for landing, and your landing lights are set. That's literally it. In addition, you're going to do like a mini checklist in here, which is gears down, flaps set for landing. Sweet. So that's that. So I'm going to turn back towards final here. Okay. Get the autopilot back on. And now we're going to go into a Now we're going to do the overhead brake. So for the overhead brake, we want to be 250. We're going to, and I'm going to go ahead and slew my turning pod. So I'm cooey heading short to cycle those channels. And I'm going to go ahead and just put my targeting pod on the end of the runway. And I'm going to need to start my turn. So then I actually end up intercepting that course. And we're going to stay at 150 feet AGL above the runway. So AGL is above ground level. So our rad out is close enough, so we're just going to stick with that. And I currently have a targeting pod there on the end of the runway. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make it soy, or speed as well. So the reason why is I want to know specifically when I cross over that, because as lead, if I'm lead coming in on a brake, I want to start my brake at the touchdown into the runway. So then my flight can all do their brake prior to the departure into the runway. So the way this is going to help is I actually see it pass underneath me. So I'm going to look for the dot on the targeting pod to pass through. And boom. So I'm going to now back off the power, 30 degrees of bank, or 45 degrees of bank, excuse me, and 2G pull. 2G pull. And right now I'm at like 1.8. I'm actually descending slightly, so I need to pull more. And we want to make sure we're below 200 knots. 200 knots is the key speed for the gear. And we're going to roll out on that reciprocal heading of the runway. Get the speed up, and now that we're wings level, we're going to drop the gear and the flaps. Get that balloon back up, so I'm at the 1500. And my spacing is a little tight, but we're good, but we'll be fine. So what I'm going to look for is a 45 degree off. So you can kind of cheat with the targeting pod, you waiting for that angle off there, and you're now at 45 degrees off. So now we're going to set for a 30 degree, a little bit over since I said I was tight. So you're going to look for, you want 30 degrees of bank, at least, right around 30 degrees to 45, and 3 degrees nose low or a little bit lower, and probably a little bit lower than halfway. So we're going to dip the nose down, bring back the power, we're going to turn it up just a little bit, but we're still good on our angle here. We're about 40 degree bank. Not a 60 degree bank, sorry. The 60 degree bank's for the other. And I'm going to give some speed brake because I need to descend a little bit faster because I was a little high.
Altitude, altitude.
So getting the speed back using the speed brakes. As you can see now, I'm going to put the speed brakes in, let that speed go off. And now as I'm coming down, I'm going to put the flight path marker on the 1,000 footers. And then I'm going to ease it all the way to the end of the runway and just let her ease down. Ease it down. And then now I'm going to do speed brakes out again. Let the nose, holding the nose off a bit just to use the elevators for some aero braking. And for the A-10, you can actually get your nose wheel steering on at 70, but I go ahead and wait until I'm at 50. And FYI, you won't be able to see 50 in the HUD. The only way to actually see additional information like that is you can go function Steerpoint. Let's pull up the CDU here. And then you can actually see how it says 50 indicated, but let's go ahead and change this. True airspeed 70. That's still not correct, but we can go ahead and flip it to ground speed. So we're actually going 30 knots right now, and we can slow her down just a little bit more. And we can go ahead and put our flaps, or our speed brake in. We can pull up our checklist. So as we are getting off the runway here, we can go ahead and I really need to clean off the floor underneath my rudder pedals so that I'm not sliding around. We can go ahead and stop here and finish our checklist. So in order to finish our checklist, we're going to put our IFF into standby. We're going to go ahead and turn off the ILS and turn off our TACAN, and anti-skid can also come off and our canopy can open. We can also bring up our flaps. We could adjust our HUD. Now those cautions, that's going to be a combination of the anti-skid and then also the weight on wheels for over a certain amount of time and we stop. The EAC kicks off automatically, and so that's why. So if you're going to rearm repair, just make sure you kick that back on before you take back off. Landing lights panel set, we're going to turn off our pitot heat. We didn't adjust any defog, we need to make sure all that's off. Position lights are now to flashing since we're on the ground, and anti-collision lights are off since we're off the runway. And our flaps are up. We're going to have our flaps up for now. If you're going to go back and take off, I recommend just leaving your flaps at 50 for takeoff. And now we can do a shutdown. So that is a start taxi takeoff with some navigation information. I hope you liked it.